My name is Emily Carter. And the night my marriage ended, I was standing barefoot on the cold kitchen floor of our house in Austin, Texas, holding a cracked coffee mug I didn't even remember picking up. Emily, I'm not happy anymore. That was it. No warning. No shouting. No drama. Just one sentence, spoken at 11:47 p.m., that quietly erased 7 years of my life. Jason didn't look angry. He looked relieved, like a man finally setting down a heavy bag he never wanted to carry. I remember nodding, not because I understood, but because my body forgot how to fight back. He said he needed space. Said we'd both grown apart. Said this wasn't anyone's fault. But when he walked past me, dragging his suitcase across the hardwood floor, I noticed something strange. He didn't look back. Not even once. That should have been my first clue. For years, I had been the woman who kept things running quietly. I cooked. I cleaned. I supported his career. I smiled at parties and stayed silent during arguments. I thought that was love. Turns out, I had trained him to believe I would always stay small. The house felt massive after he left. Every tick of the wall clock sounded like a countdown to something I didn't understand yet. I sat on the kitchen floor until sunrise. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just kept replaying his last words. I'll file for divorce next week. Next week. Like he was talking about canceling a gym membership. That morning, I checked his social media for the first time in months. And that's when my chest tightened. A woman I didn't recognize had liked every one of his recent photos. Her name was Lena. Young. Confident. The kind of woman who didn't apologize for taking up space. I told myself I was overthinking. I always did. But deep down something had already cracked open. Here's the truth no one tells you about divorce. It doesn't break you all at once. It breaks you in quiet pieces. A missing coffee mug. An empty side of the bed. A future you can't recognize anymore. That afternoon, Jason came back to grab some documents. He spoke gently. Too gently. Emily, you'll be okay, he said, placing the keys on the counter. You're strong in your own way. In your own way. That sentence burned worse than anger. Because what he really meant was, you won't fight me. And at that moment he was right. But standing there, watching his reflection disappear in the front door glass, something shifted inside me. Not rage. Not revenge. Clarity. For the first time, I realized something terrifying and powerful. Jason had no idea who I was becoming. I remember asking myself that night, if the person you trusted most walked away without looking back, would you chase them or would you let them go forever? I wonder what would you have done? That night, I opened my laptop. Not to beg, not to cry, but to read. Divorce laws, financial records, joint accounts. And with every click, my fear slowly turned into focus. Jason thought this was the end of my story. He had no idea. It was only the beginning. It was almost midnight when I closed my laptop. The glow from the screen faded, but something inside me stayed awake. I had spent hours reading, not stories, not heartbreak quotes, but facts. Our joint savings, property laws in Texas, divorce settlements. I learned something important that night. Jason didn't just walk away from me. He walked away believing I wouldn't notice what he was leaving behind. The next morning, I made coffee for one. Same mug. Still cracked. But my hands didn't shake this time. I drove through downtown Austin, past places that used to feel like ours. The bridge where we watched fireworks. The cafe where he proposed with a borrowed ring. Everything looked the same. I didn't. At noon, my phone buzzed. A message from Jason. I'll come by later to grab the rest of my things. No apology. No explanation. Just logistics. I typed okay and deleted it. Then typed it again and sent it. That afternoon, I did something I had never done in our entire marriage. I opened the locked filing cabinet in his home office. Jason always said it was work stuff. I respected that. Too much. Inside, I found folders neatly labeled. Taxes. Investments. And one thin envelope tucked behind everything else. It wasn't sealed. Inside were printed emails, hotel reservations, flight confirmations, and her name again. Lena. Las Vegas. 3 months ago. My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. Because suddenly everything made sense. The late nights. The sudden gym obsession. The way he stopped asking about my day. This wasn't a marriage that slowly died. It was one he quietly replaced. That evening, Jason returned. He moved through the house like a guest who already felt gone. "Did you eat?" he asked politely. I nodded. A lie, but an unnecessary truth. He avoided my eyes as he packed, folded his shirts, zipped his suitcase. Finally, he cleared his throat. "There's someone else," he said. Not regretfully, not proudly, just factual. "I thought you should know." I looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time, I saw fear behind his calm. Not fear of losing me. Fear that I wasn't reacting the way he expected. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. "Does it matter?" I smiled. "No," I said softly. "It doesn't." That confused him. Because men like Jason rely on one thing. Your emotional collapse. When it doesn't come, they don't know where to stand. He left an hour later. This time, I locked the door behind him. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the dining table with a notebook, and I wrote 3 words at the top of the page. My life. My terms. I listed everything I had given up for him. My paused career. My silence. My compromises. Then I wrote another list. Everything I still had. My education. My name.
My time.
And something new. Information. Jason thought divorce was freedom. He had no idea it was also exposure. The next day, I scheduled 2 appointments. One with a lawyer, and one with myself. I walked into a small office near South Congress Avenue. Glass walls. Calm voice. The lawyer flipped through the documents I brought. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "You're more prepared than most," she said. I nodded. I learned fast. When I walked out, the sun felt warmer. Not because things were fixed, but because I finally knew where I stood. Jason thought I was surviving. He didn't realize I was positioning. And somewhere between those quiet steps through Austin streets, between heartbreak and clarity, I stopped being the woman he left behind and became the woman he would soon regret underestimating. The first thing I learned after divorce became real was how invisible married women are. Not ignored, just underestimated. Jason moved into a downtown apartment within a week. Modern building, glass walls, the kind of place that looked impressive from the outside and empty on the inside. I knew because I passed it every morning on my way to work, not by accident.
By choice.
I didn't follow him. I didn't spy. I simply paid attention, something I had stopped doing for years. 2 weeks later, I met Lena. Not face to face. Not yet. I saw her reflection before I saw her name again. It was a Saturday afternoon at a coffee shop near Zilker Park. I was sitting by the window, pretending to read, when laughter cut through the quiet.
Light. Confident.
Careless. Jason walked in first. Then her. She touched his arm the way women do when they believe they've won something. I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. Like watching characters on a screen you no longer relate to. They sat 3 tables away. Close enough for me to hear fragments.
Trips. Plans.
A future built on assumptions. She said, "I can't believe she just let you go." Jason laughed. "That's Emily," he replied. "She hates conflict." That sentence settled quietly in my chest. Not because it hurt, but because it revealed something important. Jason still believed I was predictable. After they left, I stayed seated, finished my coffee. Then I opened my phone and scheduled another meeting with my lawyer. Not to fight, to understand timing. Because revenge isn't loud. It's patient. Over the next few weeks, Jason became careless. He forgot I still had access to certain shared accounts. Forgot I knew his habits. Forgot I had once managed everything he didn't want to think about. I watched as small cracks appeared. Late rent payment. Missed credit card bill. A quiet email from his company's HR department asking questions he wasn't ready to answer. Nothing dramatic. Just pressure. Meanwhile, Lena posted everything online. Dinner dates. Weekend getaways. Hashtags about new beginnings. She wanted to be seen. I let her. One evening, Jason called me unexpectedly. Hey, did you change the internet password? I smiled. No, I said calmly. It reset automatically when the account holder changed. Silence. Oh, he muttered. I didn't realize. Of course he didn't. That night, I stood in the empty living room of the house that would soon be sold. Boxes stacked neatly. Memories packed away like items someone else owned. I realized something then. I didn't want to destroy Jason's life. I wanted him to see it, to understand exactly what he lost. When he assumed I would stay quiet forever. The divorce papers were still being processed. Nothing final, which meant nothing was settled. And as I turned off the lights and locked the door behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night he left.
Control.
Jason thought choosing another woman was his victory. He didn't know. The game had only just begun. Control doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up quietly, in moments where you realize someone else is starting to lose theirs. Jason lost his on a Tuesday morning. I knew because my phone lit up with 3 missed calls before sunrise. Then a text. Emily, we need to talk. I didn't respond. Not immediately. I made breakfast. Watered the plants. Let time do what panic couldn't. An hour later, I called him back. What's wrong? I asked, calm and neutral. There was a pause on the line. My credit card was declined, he said. At the grocery store. I almost laughed. Almost. That's strange, I replied. You should call the bank. I did, he snapped, then softened his tone. They said the account was flagged because of the divorce process. Of course it was. Joint finances don't disappear quietly. They leave fingerprints. I didn't know that would happen, he added quickly. Did you? I let another pause settle. No, I said. But my lawyer warned me things might get complicated. That word again. Complicated. It used to scare me. Now it felt like protection. Later that afternoon, I ran into Lena again. This time, on purpose. A boutique on South Congress Avenue. Mirrors everywhere. Reflections you couldn't escape. She stood near the register, scrolling on her phone, frustration written across her face. Jason wasn't with her. Interesting. I walked past, pretending not to notice. Then she looked up. Our eyes met. Recognition flickered. Not because she knew me well, but because she had imagined me. You're Emily, she said. Not a question. I smiled politely. Yes. An awkward silence followed. She tucked her hair behind her ear. A nervous habit. I've heard a lot about you, she added. I nodded. I'm sure you have. She waited for anger. For bitterness. She got neither. I didn't mean, she started. You don't need to explain, I said gently. Life happens. That confused her. People expect drama from women like me. They don't know what to do with grace. Jason called that night. Again. This time his voice was tight. Did you meet Lena today? Yes. What did you say to her? Hello, I replied. And goodbye. Silence stretched. She's done comfortable, he said carefully. I leaned back against the couch. Jason, I said softly. She's dating a man who's still legally married. Discomfort is part of the experience. He exhaled sharply. You're doing this on purpose. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. No, I corrected. I'm just not protecting your choices anymore. That night, I slept deeply. For the first time in months. Because something had shifted. Lena was no longer confident. Jason was no longer in control. And me? I was no longer reacting. I was setting the pace. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, truths began surfacing in places Jason hadn't secured. Promises he made twice. Stories that didn't match. Plans built on half-truths. I didn't expose them. I let them collide. Because the most powerful revenge isn't destroying someone. It's letting them face themselves. Without your help. Jason thought leaving me was the hard part. He was wrong. Losing control was. And he was only beginning to understand what that felt like. Losing control doesn't happen loudly. It slips away in moments you don't notice. Until one day, everything feels unfamiliar. Jason started noticing. It began with small things. Lena stopped answering his calls immediately. Her texts grew shorter, less affectionate. I knew because he called me again. Not angry, not demanding, uncertain. "Emily," he said one evening, "did you ever feel like I hid things from you?" I closed my eyes. The irony almost hurt. "I felt a lot of things," I replied calmly. "But I don't think this conversation is about me." He hesitated. "She's been asking questions," he admitted.
About you.
"About us." I leaned against the window, watching the Austin skyline glow under streetlights. "That makes sense," I said. "When people fall in love with a story, they eventually want facts." He didn't respond, because he knew. The next week, I finalized the paperwork to sell the house. Our house. The realtor walked through each room, clipboard in hand, describing upgrades and market value. Jason didn't come. He said he was busy. Truth was, he couldn't stand seeing something solid slip away. I signed the documents without shaking. That surprised even me. Afterward, I drove to Lady Bird Lake and sat by the water. I remembered the version of myself who once begged silently for attention. She felt distant now, like someone I used to know. That evening, Lena messaged me.
Directly. "Can we talk?"
I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied.
Sure.
We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. Neutral territory. She arrived early. No makeup. No confidence armor. Just a woman trying to understand the ground beneath her. "I didn't know," she said almost immediately, "about how recent everything was." I nodded. "You knew enough," I said gently. "But that's not a crime. It's human." She swallowed. "He tells different versions," she admitted. "Sometimes I don't know which one is real." I took a sip of water. "Jason doesn't lie to hurt people," I said. "He lies to protect the version of himself he prefers." That landed. She looked down at her hands. "Do you hate me?" she asked quietly. I considered the question. "No," I said honestly. "I don't hate women who believe men's promises. I used to be one." Her eyes filled. When we parted, she hugged me. Brief. Uncertain. But real. Jason didn't know about that meeting.
Not yet.
A few days later, he showed up at the house unannounced. Boxes were everywhere. He looked around, confused. "You're really selling it," he said. "Yes." "What if I wanted to buy you out?" I met his eyes. "You don't want responsibility," I said. "You want options." That stung. He paced the room. "This isn't how I imagined things," he muttered. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I imagine you thought I'd fall apart," I replied. "Disappear quietly." He stopped moving. "I didn't think. That's the problem," I said softly. "You never did." That night, I received confirmation from my lawyer. The divorce settlement was leaning heavily in my favor. Because timing matters. Because preparation matters. Because silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. Jason's messages became more frequent after that.
Confused.
Defensive. Regretful. Lena stopped posting online. Her happiness no longer needed an audience. And me? I booked a flight. One way. Not to escape, but to begin something new. As I zipped my suitcase, I realized something important. Revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes, it looks like walking forward, without carrying anyone else's weight. Jason thought losing me was a chapter he closed. He didn't know. My absence was about to change everything. The morning I boarded the plane to San Francisco, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. Not fear. Not hesitation. Not sorrow. Only possibility. The window seat showed a sky streaked with gold. Clouds that seemed endless. And for the first time, I realized the story Jason thought he controlled was already rewriting itself. I arrived in the city a few hours later. Air crisp. streets buzzing. A city full of strangers and opportunities. I didn't have a plan, not a detailed one, but I had clarity. And clarity is more dangerous than anger. Within 2 days, I had rented a small studio apartment near Mission District. Bare walls, empty shelves, freedom in its purest form. That evening, I walked along Market Street just listening. People laughing, vendors calling out, music spilling from cafes. And I thought about Jason. He was still in Austin, still assuming I would crumble quietly, still thinking Lena was safe in her illusions. He didn't know. I was learning to thrive. Over the next week, I started reconnecting with myself. Emails I had ignored for years. Opportunities one had paused. Conversations I had postponed. And slowly, I built a quiet life. One Jason couldn't touch. One Lena couldn't influence. One I owned entirely. Then, an unexpected email arrived. From Jason. Emily, can we meet? Just to settle things properly. I read it twice. Then 3 times. Not because I missed him, but because I realized something critical. He wanted closure on his terms. Not on mine. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote 3 questions. Why does he think I need permission to live my life? What does he fear about me now? How far am I willing to go for myself? By the time I finished writing, I knew my answer. I was willing to go far. Not for revenge. Not for humiliation. For clarity. For power. For freedom. 2 days later, I called him. Meet me at the old cafe, I said. Downtown Austin. There was silence. Then hesitation. Finally, agreement. When I arrived, I saw Jason sitting at a corner table, coffee cooling in front of him. He looked nervous. Vulnerable. I smiled. Softly. Calmly. Emily, he began. I didn't realize. Jason. I interrupted gently. I don't need explanations. And I don't need apologies. He blinked. Then what? I need truth, I said. About everything you thought you could hide. He shifted in his seat. Uncomfortable. Not because he was guilty. Because he had underestimated me. And that's when I felt it. The first real sense of power in months. The knowledge that he wasn't in control. That Lena wasn't a shield. That my life was mine to shape. He tried to speak again, but I raised a hand. Let me finish. I've spent 7 years giving more than I received. I've spent nights wondering if I mattered. And now, I don't wonder anymore. Jason looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. Or a stranger. Emily. Stop, I said firmly. This is not about me confronting you. This is about me stepping forward. I left the cafe that day with the first real sense of liberation I'd felt in years. And somewhere in Austin, Jason realized what he had lost. Not his home. Not his convenience. Not Lena.
Me. The real me.
That night, I walked along the Bay Trail in San Francisco.
Cool wind.
City lights reflecting on the water. Every step reminded me I was no longer reactive. I was deliberate. No one would set the pace for my life but me. Jason's calls went unanswered. His texts ignored. And Lena? She no longer posted pictures of their life. Uncertainty had reached her too. I had started something subtle. Quietly. Relentlessly. The game had changed. And this time I was writing the rules. By the time I woke up in San Francisco, the city had become familiar. Not just the streets. Not just the skyline. But the feeling of being fully in control of my own life. The divorce was finalized that week. No arguments. No theatrics. No lingering doubts. Just a piece of paper confirming what I already knew. I was free. I decided to reclaim everything I had paused in Austin. My career. My friendships. My dreams. I enrolled in a small publishing company. Not because I needed approval, but because I wanted to create. To build a life filled with purpose and not just reaction. One afternoon, a familiar number flashed on my phone. Jason. I ignored it. Not out of anger. Out of recognition. He called again that night. Emily, can we talk? I finally answered.
Calm.
Collected. I don't think we need to, I said. You've already made your choices. I've made mine. There was a long pause. Then he whispered, almost broken. I didn't know. I didn't realize what I lost. And in that moment, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only peace. Because the victory wasn't in his regret. It was in my freedom. A few days later, I bumped into Lena again. Not intentionally. Just life's way of bringing closure. She looked at me nervously. I wasn't expecting this, she said. I smiled softly. I know. She studied me for a moment and then nodded. I understand now. Not everything is what it seems. And not every victory is worth celebrating. We parted without animosity. Not enemies. Not friends. Just people who had learned lessons the hard way. Weeks passed. Jason moved again, searching for comfort he no longer knew how to find. Lena faded from my life and social media. The distractions, the illusions, the false victories, they all disappeared. And me? I launched my first project at work. A team I led. A vision I nurtured. I moved into a brighter apartment overlooking the bay. I traveled alone for the first time in years. I laughed freely. I cried openly. I made decisions not out of fear, not out of compromise, but because they were mine. The night before my first solo exhibition at a local gallery, I stood by the window and reflected. The city lights danced on the water. The wind whispered through the open balcony door. I thought of Jason, of Lena, of the life I once paused for them. And I realized, the only revenge worth having is living your life fully, unapologetically, and letting those who underestimated you watch from the sidelines. No words, no schemes, no chaos, just Emily, complete, unstoppable,
Free.
and for the first time in my life, I knew I had won, not by hurting anyone, not by proving them wrong, by becoming exactly who I was meant to be. The story that began with heartbreak in Austin, Texas, ended here, in strength, clarity, and freedom.